just wondering, Scott, looking at growth strategies and business resilience and what you've been up to the last 2 years and especially last few months, right? What's your thoughts on this and how does it relate to your business? Because today we're going to be talking about your business. And just to set the stage, are we looking at 100% help desk or are we at modern earth? What's the brand that you're putting out to the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. And 100% help desk has been our brand for the last 10 years. And that's something that we've stuck with even through a few other things that have gone on. So for example, we back in 2014, we absorbed customers from a few other operations, things that were XLab Interactive being one of them. XLab Interactive is a cool sounding brand, but we stuck with what we had. Sorry, my phone makes noise here. I made it stop. Okay. So XLab Interactive was something that was around in 2014, and we brought that in. And what people have for familiarity with a brand is, that's the relationship they have. But when you have a relationship with a company, with a service provider, with a vendor, it's not the same as having a relationship with a human. What people have is a relationship with the humans inside the organization. So when there's a shift like that happening, people want to know, am I going to like this new partner that I have? Or what kind of a partner swap are we doing here? So you can the customer can think about whether they have an ongoing relationship with the company, but do they like the ongoing relationship they're going to have with the humans in the company? So when Microsoft changed from being primarily guided from Bill Gates to Steve Ballmer, did people reevaluate the relationship with the company? On some levels, they did actually. But it's still a relationship with the company, and the continuity, it's up to that leader to choose their successor, right? So when it comes to Modern Earth, that's probably the largest group that we brought on in terms of customers we brought into 100% help desk. So we did it a little more carefully than other ones in the past, where we kept that brand around because it's a very well-known brand in Winnipeg. And there was a large number of customers coming over, and it was going to take us a long time to talk to them all. And really the plan was to take a year to contact everybody, because when they're on renewal cycles, they're going to come up, and eventually they're all going to come around to at least one billing cycle or something like that, or change cycle. And sometimes it's only the billing cycles where customers really remember, oh yeah, I have a relationship here with these people and I trust these people. Oh, I just realized that Dan's not there anymore. Who's this other guy and this other team, really? And it really wasn't just, Dan to Scott. It was like a group of people over there that there was a half a dozen people that people remembered. And now we have a different half a dozen people or more that people are working with. So what's the brand? Well, Modern Earth as a brand is something that is cared for by 100% help desk. To try and explain it is a little bit complicated. So I just say, hi, I'm here from Modern Earth sometimes, but it depends who I'm talking to. Right. Because I have a lot of other customers who have existing relationships. But now, after a year, I think it's very well accepted by all the customers that we are who we are, and they do understand there's a change and they're comfortable with the change. If anybody really wasn't comfortable with the change, they're already gone by now, found other providers. But for the most part, that didn't happen. We had no unusual amount of churn or anything. So, right. So I've been representing 100% help desk in the market for the last 10 years, and I've been representing Modern Earth in the market for over a year now. And those are really one and the same company at this point. We operate them together. 100% help desk is more of a technical services company. We provide the hosting backend, and that's some of the fun things that I like to do, the Linux hacking and the server admin and all that sort of stuff. network security for the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side is Modern Earth, which is really known as a marketing company. And we've been doing a lot of that in the last year, growing that part of our portfolio. We've been in the marketing world for a long time. Like I would say over the last 20 plus years, I've done some accidental marketing projects in the very beginning. And then I realized that as a programmer in the internet world, you're also a marketer no matter what.
Okay, right. So, talk to us about the customers who are retained, and what made you bring Modern Earth on board with 100% help desk? I mean, especially in the context of the last 2 years, a lot of people are saying there's a lot of uncertainty out there, but you must have seen a growth opportunity, right? So what was it that
sure.
triggered? Yeah, what is it that triggered that opportunity? How did you identify the opportunity?
Well, I've been in this specific market for over 20 years, and so I know who the players are and I know what the strengths of them are. So it gives me a head start on market research, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
knowing my backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked around at who was out there, who else was active in the market, I remember Modern Earth from, the last couple of decades being a competitor to us.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I realized that they're not doing the same amount of work they were before, they're doing something different. I wasn't aware of what was going on internally, but I also was able to just contact the owner and say, are you interested in a conversation? Because the same way that I know he's been around for that long, he knows that I've been around for that long. So it's kind of an industry thing. So being an industry insider, by industry, I'm defining the Winnipeg website building market. That's a fairly small thing to wrap your hands around. Most of us know who most of us are.
Right.
And of course, people come and go in that marketplace all the time, but the ones that have been around for a while. So how do I identify the market or the opportunity? Really, it's just a matter of going through the market and saying who's out there, researching a little bit of who's new, who I'm not aware of, who's active, who's less active, who's more active. What are some of these people's trajectories? Knowing that they were on a growth curve at one point and they were doing a lot of work,
right.
And now if they've kind of plateaued or even started to decline, what's the reason for that? And in this case, the reason is simply that he's focused on a different line of business because he's doing something else. So for me, it was an opportunity to come in there and say, okay, if you're focused on something else, let me take care of this business. We'll make a deal. We'll acquire those customers and we'll service them. And again, because we know each other, you can evaluate me by reputation as well. And that's something that actually played a big part in this deal, I think.
Okay. So would you say, sorry, I'm just cutting in. Would you say that, it was important, the relationship you had with the previous owners in helping you make a decision?
It was because some of the analysis is already done because like due diligence was still required. We of course did that step, but part of the due diligence is knowing reputations and methodologies and, what's the accountability level of this other person. If you haven't read the book Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, that's worth going into.
Okay, yeah. So what's the key takeaway for you from that book?
The speed of trust. When you trust people, things happen faster.
Right.
And this is one of those examples where I had enough trust in Dan to say, I'm interested in pursuing a deal here. And the same vice versa, where when I approached him, he's saying, yeah, this is a worthwhile conversation for me. Of course, we still both have to do our homework and make sure that it's a good deal, but we take away some of that initial analysis where you're not sure who's this guy, is he capable of completing his end of the deal or not. So that's where working in the industry that we're in really helped. And this is what I think of as maintaining the same long-term goal. So when I started out, my long-term goal was not to go around purchasing other client base, but my long-term goal was to get to a certain number of hosted sites that we wanted to get to in order to build a core, not only a core of recurring revenue, but a core of customers we had relationships with that we could do work for. And one of the ways to get there was to acquire those customers. Purchasing customers is a well-known thing in industry, because it's actually, in a lot of cases, a lot easier than closing a sale one customer at a time, right? So if you can bring in hundreds of customers at a time or more, then it saves so much in the sales cycle, especially when you're in high trust environments. In our industry, I consider to be a high trust industry, in the sense that even just working on a company's website, people consider that to be something that can destroy their reputation quite easily. But also we're working on their infrastructure, their email. If a company's email is down, they consider that to be absolutely critical. Worse than if the phones go out in a lot of cases. So there's a high trust required. And not only are we managing those services, but we're asking for access. You know, when I meet somebody and first time I meet them, I ask them for passwords to their critical systems. That usually is a bit of a pushback. So we have ways of building trust with customers that go in different ways to make them feel comfortable, make them trust us. But again, you know, if we want to go faster, acquiring a block of customers gets us that big jump ahead. And one thing I'll say is that since we did this, we have found it easier to bring on other customers from other sources. It's easier to close deals with customers when you have a bigger customer base.
Okay, that's interesting. So, you know, you spend a lot of time telling us about trust and building trust. What do you think is the core to its building trust? Is it the consistency in delivery of what you promise?
Delivery absolutely is important, and so is the right amount of transparency. So if I consistently deliver a product to you, you know, week by week or whatever it is, that's fine. But if you have zero understanding of what I'm doing to get it there, you might still not trust me as much as you would if I said, I'm doing this for you every week, and by the way, here's the method that I'm using to get it there. And if you look at the technology I'm using and you go, oh, well, that's actually pretty good. It looks like you're using industry standard software, industry standard solutions, best practices, things like that can build trust. That's not the only way. You could say, oh, we have a custom solution that no one else has. We're unique. That can build trust in expertise, but it also can raise some flags in terms of being unique is sometimes dangerous, because, you know, if it breaks, then there isn't another one, kind of thing.
Right.
So in the tech world, most of our customers would have no idea what I'm saying if I tried to explain things fully. So it's the right amount of transparency. And if I tell one customer that, oh, we're using open source software, and they go, what does that mean? And I say, open source software means that everybody can download the source code to look at it. And the customer says, well, that sounds terrible. You must have security nightmares. Well, that's not true at all. In fact, it's been proven over the last 20 years that open source software is more secure because the bugs get found faster and fixed faster. And the stuff that we run our lives on, you know, basic email, websites, all that sort of stuff, operating systems, it is open source software.
Okay.
So again, it's being careful to know your audience and give the right amount of transparency. What does somebody want to know to make them comfortable? And if they want to know, yeah, we do backups. Okay, good. Gotcha. We're backing up our stuff. For some customers, that's all that they can really wrap their heads around, because they're just not educated in the services that we do. So consistent delivery, yes, for sure, because if customers phone us on a regular basis and say, hey, I need this thing restored from backup, we say, oh yeah, that backup got deleted. I don't know what happened. My dog ate it. That kind of stuff. It doesn't matter if I tell them that we're doing weekly backups if they don't exist, or daily backups, or whatever it is.
Yeah, you mentioned industry standard, and then you also said being unique in what you offer, right? And that's always the thing that distinguishes, kind of thing, like the brand, okay, of what makes us different, but at the same time how we can deliver something which is not so far out that someone else can't support you in the future if we are not around. You don't want someone to feel that they're the guinea pig for something that you're experimenting with, right? So how do you balance that two, industry standards, at the same time we are unique, to give that confidence that, okay, so I come to Modern Earth, this is what they're going to give me. The back office stuff, I'm not a technical person, I'm a customer. I know Scott is using some solid software there, and he's knowledgeable, and he can tweak it to my needs. That tweaking it, I guess, to the customer's needs might be the thing that's unique about you, right? How do you? What I'm trying to get at is maybe I'm sure there's an element of understanding the psychology of the individual customer, right?
Yeah, well, and again, relationships are with people, with customers, and so making them feel like we're doing something for them and doing it the way that they want it, that's where we can bring in the unique selling proposition. The industry standard software is good, and industry standard solutions is good because there's two reasons. One is it avoids vendor lock-in. It also avoids that scenario where there's one person in the world who knows how this system works, and so I need to get Bobby to fix it because Bobby's the only guy in the world that knows how this piece of software works. So the stuff that we work with, it goes the opposite direction of what some salespeople would want, because once we build something for somebody, they could just download it and go to a different company and have them host it. They could just take it somewhere else and have a different programmer work on it. But that's part of the selling feature of it, is that if you don't like me at the end of this, you could take it all and walk away.
Right.
So there are other systems out there that have vendor lock-in, where you build something and it becomes so elaborate that you realize in order to move to another vendor, you would have to build the whole thing from scratch, and it's not worth it. So they end up locked in.
Right.
So using industry standard, interoperability, that's something that we look for. I look for that in general as a principle, because even on at my level, with all these accounts, like if I said, oh, we need to switch because something happened in the industry, something that I wasn't expecting happened, and I need to suddenly change some technical feature, we're not locked in either. Like, we're the vendor, but we're not locked into the solutions that we're using necessarily. Or we try to lock into things that are going to have a path. They're going to have a way out at some point.
Talk to us about your team, Scott, because now you use that word team. So it's like, how do you give confidence to the customer that no, you can't get me, Scott? My guys, any one of them will be able to handle the situation for you, kind of thing. How do you build that confidence?
Well, for one thing, my team is more reliable than I am.
Mhm.
They,
That's an interesting
they
part.
are
Elaborate on that.
they're
You're the boss.
there to
No,
respond to clients, and a lot of time I'm in meetings. I could be in a meeting for an hour or 2 hours at a time, and I don't respond during those times.
mhm,
Uh, and that can happen often during the day where I'm off doing something else.
mhm,
But my team is there, and as individuals, they're all very responsible people, right? And
mhm,
their primary task is to respond to things, whereas my primary task is to push from the other side in a lot of cases, right? So I'm going out
mhm.
digging for things. So having a team that does what people expect is a big part of it. The team that we built was entirely handpicked right from the beginning.
Mhm.
So starting in 2012, I did not put any ads out saying, hey, we're hiring, send your resume. I had some conversations with specific people, and I said, this is what we're going to do. And then I called the technician, the first technician I hired. I knew he was probably available, and I called him and I said, look, I want you to work for me.
Mhm.
And this sort of pattern went on for a while. And
Mhm.
even when I wasn't sure, when I didn't have somebody in mind, I could go to my network. I could go to a network meeting sort of thing and say, hey, I'm looking to hire somebody for this sort of position.
Mhm.
Refer somebody to me. And that's how we hired our guy who's been with me for 10 years now.
Mhm.
And even more recently than that, there are people that we've been working with as strategic partners, and we just said, you know what,
Mhm.
I want you to. The conversation kind of naturally evolves into the next thing of you should work for us. We should make this a formal employment offer. So
Mhm.
we're handpicking people, and we tend to pick senior people with a lot of experience. When you have a small team, I think that's far more important,
Mhm.
because with small team of junior people doesn't have any depth to it.
Mhm.
But our team now with 10 people, we have some of our staff have less experience, but it's okay because we've got people surrounding them to lean on, right? So we've got a lot of depth in our team, and
Yeah.
even the ones who are relatively junior in the industry, they have somewhere to go. They're not just making up the answers. They've got senior developers to work with, that kind of thing.
Mhm. I got one more question to ask you, but before that, I thought, well, Brian, you'd like to come in and maybe ask Scott from a customer-centric point of view. What are the questions you think that a customer would be asking Scott, right?
Well, before I ask the question, I do want to step in on that last spot about his team.
Yes.
Because I've been a customer of Scott's for the last few years. When I have a problem, I don't call Scott. I call Ryan. I get in touch with Ryan. Just the other day, I got an email, and I get a lot of these. We've hacked into your website. We're going to cause some problems for you, and so on and so forth. And normally, I ignore them. This one, they created a bounce back, so the sending email was my own email.
Mhm.
And they actually spent a little time writing it up officially. Okay, just in case, I probably shouldn't ignore this one. So I sent a message. I forwarded to Ryan asking him, what do you think? He was back to me within the hour saying, yeah, I've seen those before. Don't worry about it. They haven't hacked your system. Everything's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Within the hour, I had my answer. Yeah, I thought that's what it's going to be. I just wanted to be safe. And this is the kind of response I get. And that's why I haven't changed.
Right.
So, but no, these are the kind of things that customers are looking for. Or from my point of view, I'm looking for somebody I can count on. That I'm looking for somebody local. So I don't know if any of this has changed since Scott's taken over Modern Earth. From my point of view, it hasn't. But I assume that the same kind of customer service still applies as it always has. I don't know if you want to add to that, Scott?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that the acquisition helped us with is growing our support team. And so, yeah, contacting Ryan, yep, he's there. And even in a more generic sense, contacting our support team, because now it's not only Ryan, but I have another employee, Rozzy, who helps out in that capacity as well. So if you send an email to support, then I'll read it. Ryan will read it. Rozzy will read it. One of us will read it and respond. So being able to scale up simply by having a larger number of customers, economy of scale helps us there, and it allows us to create redundancy on our end. And so redundancy within the team, again, when you have a small team, that's hard to do because you have your support person, your dev person, your salesperson, your management. If you have a small team, there's a lot of hats to be worn. And as the team grows, not only can some of the people wear less hats, but also the cross training happens. And so we've got more than one person to deal with things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Brian, is there something else you'd like to ask Scott?
I don't think so. I think Scott's pretty much answered a good portion of the questions here.
Okay. Let me just come in on this thing about, because we say exploring growth strategies and business resilience, and in our discussions we always look at what's the practical reality on the ground, right? And one of the definition of strategy is not so much what you've written down as this is my strategy and how do I set goals and how do I get to that goal and what are the resources and stuff, but rather what you actually practice, right? That is your real strategy. What you actually practice, what you actually do every day that takes you towards that goal, right? So based on what you do every day, what's the thing that you'd say is the defining or motivating factor of the strategy behind 100% help desk?
So if you want to talk about strategy, I'll throw a gem in here for you from a few thousand years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy without tactics is the longest road to victory.
It's a very interesting point.
Tactics. Okay, so I'll give you the whole thing.
Okay.
Strategy without tactics is the longest road to victory.
Okay.
And
give us some meat.
And
okay.
Yeah, you have to get the whole thing, Siddharth.
Okay, cool.
Just hang on one moment. Strategy without tactics is the longest road to victory. And tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat.
Sounds like Sun Tzu.
Okay.
It is Sun Tzu.
Right.
So what does this mean? I can have a good, brilliant strategy, but if I don't have the tactics, the methods, it'll take me forever.
Mm-hmm.
And in business, we don't always have forever because the losses are financial and sooner or later somebody calls the loan.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to do it the other way and you just say, look, I'm the most brilliant, whatever, technician of some kind, but you have no strategy to finish, you will fail.
Mm-hmm.
So the strategy, to me, you'd asked me about three points, and I think I said that to you very late, but having a goal, that's the strategy. And when I say goal, I mean a long-term goal. I mean like a 5-year goal or the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Right.
What kind of goal do you have that's far enough away that you're not going to have to change that goal for quite some time?
Okay.
Because if you choose short-term goals, then it's just it's like deciding what shirt you're going to wear every day. It's really not that helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of shirts, if you say I'm going to be known as the black shirt guy, my goal, I'm going to wear a black shirt every day for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And some days shirts in the wash, so you wear a gray shirt or a white shirt, but after a year, you're still known as the black shirt guy.
Right.
So if you pick that goal, you may have to change how you're going to get there. That's completely fine. So maintaining the same long-term goal and changing how we're going to get there, that's kind of what happened with this Modern Earth acquisition, because I thought I would be able to just keep signing up customers. And in 2020, that became more difficult with the method that I was on. I thought I had a strategy to get there. It wasn't going to work. And in 2020, I tried other things. We did some different types of advertising and that sort of stuff, and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
However, the acquisition strategy did work. So those short-term things, I tried, 3 different methods of growth over the course of 2 years. And then the one method did work, absolutely. And then when I look at it, I still haven't changed my long-term goal. We're still doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I look at that growth strategy. So my strategy of wanting to grow, in a certain sector, that didn't change. How we were going to get to it had to change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's responding to the environment. And we all had to respond to our environments in 2020 and in 2021 and again in 2022. And shortly 2023 is going to present a different environment. Hopefully this one will be less unpredictable than some of the previous.
Right. Okay. I liked your thing about strategy and tactics, and I know on your personal life side you do martial arts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how much of that personal thing, influences how you organize business and view the market out there?
Yeah, I have hobbies like that, and some of it is philosophical, and there's a lot of influence. So obviously I've read Sun Tzu a few times, but these are they're not the only influences. So another one good for reference is Miyamoto Musashi. There's a Book of Five Rings.
Right.
That's a good reference for philosophical life. One of his main tenets was one thing is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
He's still considered to be the greatest swordsman who ever lived, but his thought was that's not enough. You can't be just one thing. You can't be one dimensional. So he became, a writer, a philosopher, an artist, and near the end of his life, because he just figured it wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
Other philosophers, Machiavelli.
Mm-hmm.
People get a little bit scared when they hear the name, but that's because the English expression we use it as an adjective somewhat incorrectly.
Right.
He made observations on what people do. He didn't recommend that you do them all.
Mm-hmm.
So he's very insightful in how people operate.
Mm-hmm.
Still very relevant, still very valid in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And another big influence for me is John Maxwell. The 5 Levels of Leadership is a book that I've listened to it probably 10 times.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And these things all do converge for me.
Mm-hmm.
How do we build leaders? Well, in martial arts, we build leaders by training, and we, starting with children, we teach them discipline and work ethic, and with adults, the same thing. How do you accomplish something? How do you move to the next level? How do you learn skills? So building leaders is what we do in recreational martial arts for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And building leaders is a study of itself. And all these books I mentioned are ways of learning how to build leaders.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that to be resilient, I'm taking it to the next word that we have put up for discussion, to be resilient, you can't just focus on business. You got to be a multi-dimensional, complete human being in a sense. Is that something that you would advise every business person out there to pursue and understand the philosophy of your life is just as important?
Yeah. You can't be one-dimensional, but if I want to think about Musashi's tenet there, you can't be one-dimensional and be fully successful. You can be successful in one thing, but that doesn't make you a complete human, and really that's our maybe our end goal anyway. But resiliency, one of the things is, if you take something like leadership, and I've come across this a bunch of times where I talk to somebody and they tell me, oh, I'm studying leadership. Okay. But there's some things you can't study effectively. You can memorize charts and tables, which works okay for mathematics, but it doesn't work for a lot of other things. So without the doing, there's no value in the study. So, I recommend some of these books, but if you read the book and you don't apply it in some way, you might as well not read the book, actually. I would say don't read the book. So specifically with leadership, I don't think there's any way at all to apply it without having something to apply it to. So you can use that in personal relationships, in recreational things, in business life, in all of the above. I mean, there are ways for anybody to apply it. You don't have to be a certain type of person to have the opportunity to apply it. You just have to have other humans in your life.
Okay.
But resiliency is, I think, taking ideas and doing something with them. And if you don't, then you're only absorbing. And when you're absorbing, when a sponge absorbs a certain amount, it's done.
Okay.
Also, it finds it hard to move. It gets stuck.
Okay. I really like your thing about, okay, read the stuff and all that, but also do it. Right? That's what you're telling us, do it, practice it. You like something from the book, take it and apply it. Is that something that you think it's a general thing that everyone who wants to be an entrepreneur should be doing?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, here's the thing. There's some books I read and I go, oh, actually, I don't agree with this book. I'm not doing any of these things. I have to say, even some books that people recommended me to read, and they said, oh, this was great. This helped me a lot. And I read it and I go, well, I don't think this is helping me. So I have to discard that one. But there are other books where I read them and I go, well, for me, this is life-changing. I want to abandon my nets and follow this one. And it's a little bit tough. It's a little bit challenging for us to figure out how to do that, because, we have certain things in our lives that we can't just stop. We can't stop paying our bills, or we can't stop, doing certain things. But what can you do? So the two questions, what can you do? And what would it take in order to do it? Because quite often people say, well, we can't do that. That's very rarely true. Usually it's a question of what would it take to do that? You could tell me you can't breathe underwater, and I would say, well, actually you can. You just need the tank and the equipment and the stuff. Of course you can breathe under the water. So the question is, what would it take? Well, I don't own a tank. So there's steps, there's things that would have to happen. And in business, it's the same thing, right? It's like, well, I can't go into that market, or I can't make that sale, or we can't deliver that product. Well, in order to deliver that product, we would have to buy, 1-ton trucks or something. Like, what would it take? In order to buy 1-ton trucks, we would have to have a financing partner. Or what would it take?
That's a very interesting point you're saying, that what would it take? And you may not have that resource. right? So what gives you the confidence to say, I can maybe find that resource kind of thing?
I think all it is it's changing the question to one that deserves an answer. Because you could say, well, I can't do that. And if it's something that you want to do, maybe it's worth finding the next question. What would it take in order to do that? Well, I'd have to get a scuba kit. Okay. Do I want a scuba kit? Can I get a scuba kit? Well, you keep changing the question until you get one that has an answer you can live with. And now some of these are going to be a dead end. Yes, you could come to a point of, well, no, it doesn't work for me because whatever. But you can get a more complete answer, and usually that tells you a bunch of other things along the way. There are lessons learned along the way, so you can go down a different path with a little more knowledge.
There are a lot of people out there who are uncertain about the future kind of thing, and there's this challenge. Running a business has been tough the last 2 years. Do I tweak my business, do I change it, or do I go and get a job, maybe close shop and just work for someone else instead? What would you say to someone who's thinking along those lines? Should I carry on with and sort of find ways to become more resilient and build a business, or should I go and get a job instead? And that's going to be less stressful.
I had this exact conversation with somebody last week, actually. They were telling me they had an opportunity to take a full-time job. Their business, they did okay, but there's a lot of challenges, and they need to do new marketing and grow in a certain sector, and there's a lot of work to be done. But this other thing was a sure thing, where they get full-time employment, and winter is coming, and a lot of things, a lot of considerations. And I did have this exact conversation. I said, well, what would it take to have it all?
Yeah.
In order to have it all, can you work 2 full-time jobs plus give your family time and whatever else, give yourself some time, hobbies or whatnot? Can it be done? The answer is maybe. Well, what would it take? Would it take that full-time job, changing it to a 0.75 or 0.5? Maybe the employer would not accept it. I don't know. But if that's what it would take to fulfill you on the other side, then maybe that is the right choice. But when people start asking these questions, usually they know what they want.
Right.
And they don't always know that they know what they want. But there's you can trick yourself and find out. So what I mean by that is you say, well, am I going to quit my job, or am I going to recommit myself to this business and do this for another year? So what I would do is say to myself, okay, I'm shutting down the business today. And then I measure my own reaction in that moment. It's a very short moment where you say to yourself, and you get your emotion. What was your emotional response when you said that? Was it relief, or was it lost? That's just the way that you tell yourself what you want. So what you really want, and you can do it either way. You could say, well, I'm shutting down the business, or you could say, well, I'm going to take that job. I'm going to work there. Now, does that give you a sense of relief, or does that give you a sense of dread of, oh no, I have to work for this company? Now, knowing what we want doesn't always equate to what we can have, but that's where we have to figure out, is there a way to do this? Is there a way to have what I want? And if there is a way, what would it take? And, to run keep running the business longer and say no to that full-time job means, do you have to finance your business? Do you have to find a finance partner, an equity partner, a lender? What is it? Or do you just have to make one big sale? just make one great sale that'll pay your living costs for the next 6 months, and then you can focus on the business. I don't know. It depends. Yeah, I mean, there's scenarios, right?
That's interesting. Brian has been here. Specifically, I did say, Brian, you're here as a fly in a wall, but occasionally I'd like you to come in and buzz around our interviewee's head, our entrepreneur who is on the spot today, which is Scott Todorish of 100% Help Desk. Brian, buzz around Scott's head, and what are the words that you picked up from him that you think we should pick his brain? Here's our opportunity to pick somebody's brain who's been in the industry, in the tech sector in Winnipeg for so long.
Right now, I'm just still processing everything he said throwing at us here.
Yes. That's the interesting thing, isn't it, Ryan? Our friend here, Scott, he's a very philosophical man, right? He's got the art of war. But then he practices peace. I think he's a peace builder, right?
I've had a few questions along the way, but he answered them before I got a chance to ask them. So
yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me, Brian, what would your questions have been? Like, I'm curious what you would have wanted to know more about.
Well, I was trying to get a handle on where your goals were at and where you're going with things, and how you make everything work. But you've been answering those things along the way here. How you explained how you change your tactics to accomplish the goals, to keep your business moving forward and acquiring customers. You've answered the question of why you've decided to take over working with Modern Earth, and you've filled in a little bit of detail about being a little more well-rounded as a person and as a businessman, and keeping it all together. So,
well, and it's I'll give you one more thing. So let's see if I can do this trick here. This is camera 2.
Yep.
So behind my desk, this is what it looks like to the other side. So you can see the bag hanging there.
Yes.
And the mats on the floor there, and the Canadian flag, also the Korean flag, South Korean flag, which is also the flag of Taekwondo.
Right. Okay.
And that's literally beside me here. So during 2020, one of the things that I was able to do was work at my desk, stand up for an hour and do something else, and come back here. And you know what? Oxygenating the brain is a good thing, I suppose. You get a little bit of dopamine, you get a little bit of serotonin, you get a little bit of whatever, but you also just wake up a little bit. And even if I'm not accomplishing anything else that day, at least I know I did some training. I did something. And so being able to pull these things together. The other thing that you might have seen in the corner of the picture there was a chair, a comfy chair where I could sit and I could read a book. So whether that's Romeo Dallaire, or whether that's Douglas Adams, or whether that's something else.
Okay.
Taking time to do different things in our spaces. One of the things I noticed when we came into lockdowns was I lost my commute time. I have a fairly long commute time, or 40 minutes or more in most cases, which is where I would do a lot of thinking, catch a lot of podcasts in my commute time, but also some internal inside the head time when I can't do other things like type and work. So when we came into lockdowns, I realized eventually that it was important to actually create those moments for myself, because they didn't exist naturally. You're coming from the bedroom to the kitchen to the office, and that was it. So we had to create time and space.
Today you showed us your second camera, so I'm just curious. It looks like, well, what you're showing us is now you've got your work-life balance, kind of worked out in the same space.
Yeah.
Is that like always been something really important to you, work-life?
Not consciously,
Mhm.
but I mean, I always have to have other activities, otherwise, one absorbs the other, right? So
Mhm.
At the end of the workday, we can't sit and do nothing. We do something. So we either watch TV, or we go and do activities, or we keep working. And if you don't have something assigned to that time slot, one of the other things will eat it up.
Mhm. So I think a lot of us out there, we've grown up in a working world saying 8 hours, put it into work, and then have your recreation after that kind of thing. And do you think we got to be more flexible in today's world? That 8 hours straight is no longer really necessary.
Yeah, well, lately, last couple of years for sure,
Mhm.
it's been a little different. And I think of it as a slow drip of work all day long. So I could say I work 24/7. However,
Mhm.
in the middle of that 24/7 workday, if I want to do something for myself, I will, which means I could go buy groceries in the middle of the workday, or I could walk the dog, or I could read a book, and it doesn't have to be work related. But these are all things that I could do any time of day, because I can also work any time of day. So it's kind of a weaving together of the things in our life.
Mhm.
So the idea of 8 hours work, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest
Mhm.
was practical for factory workers, but we are no longer factory
Mhm.
workers. The 100-year experiment of commuting is over.
Mhm. I guess for the self-employed, it might be easy to start, mixing up that the 3 8 hours, into a new jigsaw. But you've got a team. How do you sort of advise them on this, on the flexi time bit of it, and still get them to coordinate?
Right. So there are core hours when I expect people to be available.
Okay.
And, with instant messaging, various software apps, it's not hard to be available. So even though I could be out at the store or something, my phone will tell me if somebody's trying to get a hold of me. So again, that's the evolution of where we are in the tech age as opposed to the factory age. We're not in the industrial age anymore.
Mhm.
But there are core hours where if somebody says, hey, can we have a meeting? I kind of expect somebody to make an effort to have a meeting during those core hours, right?
Mhm.
But if some of my staff, like one person said, hey, I got this opportunity to be volunteering at a shelter here Wednesday afternoons. Okay. Can I work on Saturday morning instead? Sure. Like, why not? Like, we're not operating a storefront here, and there's enough team members around that the shop isn't going to be abandoned, the virtual shop.
Yeah.
So that kind of flexibility is, I think, what people should expect at this point.
Mhm.
Because as an employer, I'm also hoping that if there were a client emergency of some kind, that my staff would respond even if it were 7 p.m. kind of
Mhm.
thing, or even for a
Okay.
Saturday.
Right. That's kind of interesting. Yeah. Come in, Brian.
Yes. How did this fit into your work plan, and how is it working for you?
Well, that's a good story. It's an Mubarak story, and he actually, let's start with Suzanne. Suzanne put on the summit, the entrepreneur summit, and she said, "You want to present something?" I said, "Yes, I do." And I thought about it, and I created this presentation, basically answering questions that I've been asked for a long, long time. And one of the questions is, people come to me and say, "How much does a website cost?" And it was always, "Well, how much money you got?" Kind of thing. It's there's not enough. It's not enough of a question. So anyway, I went through this and I developed this 4 levels of websites. The way that I write is a little bit stream of consciousness, including this presentation when I wrote it. So what I mean by that is I don't know how it ends until I write the ending, and the story tells me when it's over. So that's what happened with the 4 levels of websites. And Mubarak was there, and he saw this presentation and said, "Oh, you should make that a book." And then we jumbled that around a little while, and Carla helped me with some of the editing, and Mubarak helped me kicking it off, getting it started. And in the end of it, I ended up with this document that I published on Amazon.ca, I guess, and you can buy the book there. But what I do is I give it to prospective clients to help people to understand how to ask the right questions when they're talking to us about websites. That's really what it's designed for, is to help people understand what the conversation about a website project should be. So it's kind of funny, if you could give your potential clients a study guide on how to talk to you during the sales meeting, that's what this is.
That's a brilliant takeaway there, Scott. I think that's something that all of us can learn, to teach the client to ask the right questions.
Yeah, and it's in addition to that, too, if they read this book and went to talk to a different consultant, they would still be just as well armed.
Right.
And that was actually something I wanted to do. This is in terms of knowledge, it's a giveaway. You don't have to come to me for this.
Right. Hey, great. We've come up to the hour. We've been with Scott Torres of 100% Help Desk, and he's most certainly has been 100% helpful here with us. We're going to do a wrap up. It is the first of our podcast series for the Biz Exchange. The Biz Exchange used to meet regularly at a cafe. Then we moved into a environment where we were able to just focus on discussions and put the coffee and tea and breakfast to the side. And now, the last 2 years, we have moved on to getting online discussions. And so we've evolved. I guess we are applying what Scott taught us, the importance of it, the goal being there, which has been a cross-pollination of ideas and groups in Winnipeg. And that's how the Winnipeg Biz Exchange started. And now we're changing tactics, right, and doing this podcast. Scott,